Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to manage state locally first. Here you'll finish creating the display message component. This is the display message component. We've got a constructor element of it. I'm going to stretch it out so it looks a little bit cleaner. It looks like we're going to be adding some methods to the component. Functions to the component, and then we're going to be doing some rendering as well, because here we're rendering and we're returning a single div. And in it, we've got an H2 element in here. It says type in a new message. So this is what this component is rendering. And we're going to change it. So first, in the render method, have the component render an input element. Okay, so we can just go input element. You see it already popped up here. Button element. So we can go button. And a UL, which means an unordered list element. Okay. When the input element changes, it should trigger a handle change method. When the input element changes, it should trigger a handle change method. Also, the input element should return the value of input that's in the component state. The button element should trigger a submit message method when it's clicked. Okay, so the first thing, when the input element changes, so what we want to do is go on change. We want to do something, right? And when we do it, we're going to go this dot handle change dot bind, and we're going to bind it to this. Okay, now that we've got this in here, it's not working, and that's because there's a build error. I guess we could look in the console, but what I can tell is that we don't have a handle change function in here. So that's what we want to do. So we want to say we're going to add the handle change method, and then let's also add handle change and submit message methods. So we can do that one and this one. Okay, so now we've got them both. Now they both exist, so we see that this has popped back up. We're not getting a no function error here. But we want the handle change to do something. So handle change, we want to be able to pass in, we want it to take a parameter, right? So let's call it data. And then within here, we're going to say, whatever's getting passed in, we're going to say, what we want to do is set the state of this component. And so it's tempting to say this dot state is equal to that, but that's not the way to do it. We want to say this dot set state. This is the rule for how React works. And within the set state, we're going to pass in an object, which is going to basically, and then we're going to say input is equal to the data dot target dot value. And then each time we do this, we also want to ensure that we keep our messages. So we'll pass in the messages as well. So this is equal to this dot state dot messages. And so, yeah, now whenever we update this, the input with each change, so if I just type a single letter, this dot state, it's already inputted, it's already updated, so that the state of the input, so this input is actually S now in the actual functioning thing. And then we're passing in the messages continuously. We're just saying keep them the same, keep them the same, keep them the same. Okay. I believe we have to set the method as well. Let's see, where are we? Our last one. Handle change method. Also, your input element should render the value of input that's in the component state. The button element should trigger a submit message method when it's clicked. So on click, we want to say this dot submit message dot bind this. Okay, and so now our button is doing that. Yeah, we could actually say submit here too, just to make it so the button is a little bit more legible. Cool. So now our button's a little more legible. We've got a submit message. When we click the submit message, it runs this function. Write these two methods. The handle change method should, update the input with the user, with what the user is typing. Okay, so that's this part. We're saying each time we type something in here, SDF, that's now the state of this component has actually already updated, and it just resubmits the messages. The submit message method should concatenate the current messages. Okay, so submit message is basically going to do the same thing. It's going to set the state. So we're saying set state, and we're passing in an object. And within this object, well, on submit, we want to make it so that the input becomes equal to an empty string, right? So when we hit submit, we just want this to become blank. So we're just going to pass in an empty string. So we're resetting it to 0. And then we're going to say messages. We're going to make the messages equal to a copy, right? So this dot state dot messages. And then we're going to add this dot state dot input, I believe. Okay. So yeah, finally use the UL to map over the array of messages and render it to the screen as a list elements. Okay, cool. So within this unordered list element, we're going to want to create some JavaScript. And so first off, we want to be able to get the messages. So this dot state dot messages, that gives us the array. So now we're working with an array, and we can use the map function. And within the map, we can go make the callback. And so we're passing in, we're going to say message and index. Let me pull this back just a little bit. And so within the map, so we're going to go through each of the messages, and then we've got a message and an index. So we can return a list element and a closed list element, and we want to return in here we're going to write the message. Okay, so let's see. Nice. Submit. Cool. So it's working right now. Awesome. So yeah, the index we can use. I'm not sure. Maybe we don't need the index. I'll take that out of there. And let's run the test and see if they pass. Uh-oh. Okay, so we're failing one test, and the input element should render the value of the input in local state. The input element should render the value of input. The input element, this is the input element, should render the value of input in the local state. So maybe it's saying that we need to add the value to this thing. Value is equal to this dot. Yeah. So basically, what's happening right now is this isn't okay. Like, yeah, I'm just gonna delete this for now. What's happening right now? If I write 1 in here and I submit, it works, but it doesn't clear here. And what we want on submit, the state, when we click the submit button, it should clear, the state is actually cleared. So the input, the data, this dot state dot input is actually clear right now, but the input form hasn't reflected that. So we want to make it sure that we set the value of this input to this dot state dot input. And so now if we say 1, and then it clears here because the when we submit the click button, the state changes, and that makes it so that the value of the input changes, and then we get a functioning submit form. Okay, cool. I think that's going to pass the tests. Let's run the tests. Nice. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to go over this once again. We've got a display message component. This display message component has a state as part of the constructor. So when we create this, when we add this this component to a part of our application, it has a state assigned to it. Within the state, we have a handle change, which means that every time that we click a button, this fires off, and we set the state with each keystroke. We set the state. The input becomes equal to the new, like right now it's ASDF, and now it's ASDFG. We're setting that, and then we're also just keeping the messages the same. I'm pretty sure we need to do that. I wonder if it would pass without it. Oh, cool. We don't actually have to pass the whole messages in there. We can just pass in the input. So we're updating the input. And then we have a submit one as well. And when we have the submit, what we do is we clear our input, and we also add the last value, this.state.input. So this.state.input. And this.state.input is continuously being updated by the value form which is being passed in. So we add the old array to the new element. We add a new message to the existing array. And then in here, we just set it so that everything functions that way. So our input, so every time we set it so that on change, so every time we make a change in this form, we execute this function, the handle change function. And so, and then the value is what is always equal to the state of the application. So we're setting the value of this form equal to this. And that goes both ways. And then the submit button just fires off the submit message function. So it just fires this guy off. It sets the input to blank. And then it adds the new message, this.state.input, which we are filling in with each keystroke here, to the list of old messages. And so, yeah, that makes it so that we can add to the messages. And then we have an unordered list element here. And with each time that we update here, what we do is we run this.state.messages map. So we're saying with each message, we're adding a list element with the message inside of that list element. So that's how this works. Awesome. Well, this is a kind of a tough one, especially because it's kind of a remembering. You have to remember React and the Redux, or just the React section from 2 sessions ago. So it's a little bit tricky, but I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you in the next lesson.